Before we begin, I'd like to give a big thanks to the folks at THQ Nordic for sponsoring this video. So, 8 years ago, Darksiders released, and it instantly became one of my favorite adventure game series. I've been a fan of the series ever since. There aren't many games that scratch this particular genre itch, so naturally, I was pretty excited to hear that finally, after 6 years, we're getting a third installment. Anyway, in the years since then, I've beaten the first two games a bunch of times. I find them a lot of fun. I like the combat, the weapons, the dungeons, the puzzles, the platforming, the world. They hold up pretty well. And if you pre-order Darksiders 3, you actually get the first two games remastered for free. The War Master Darksiders 1 and the definitive edition of Darksiders 2. I can't believe I just said that on my first try. That's the first time I've ever said definitive without messing up. Anyway, that's pretty cool. Now, since the first two games implement their gameplay features in such different ways, I'm going to make a standalone video showcasing the gameplay of Darksiders 3 in comparison to Darksiders 1 and 2, what's new, and how it's changed. Regardless, something that tied all of those different elements of those games together for me was the lore and the world. Now, having there been 8 years since the first game and 6 years since the last entry, I'm going to quickly break down the lore of the Darksiders universe, the story of the Horsemen, the Charred Council, and the events of the first two games, and how they tie into the story of Darksiders 3. But I'm not just recapping you on the first two games, but also pulling some key lore from the novel as well. There's twists, turns, intrigue, and some characters that had turned out to be more influential to the story than you initially thought. Something important to keep in mind is the events of Darksiders 1, 2, and Darksiders 3 occur parallel to each other, meaning certain events in all three game stories are happening at roughly the same time as one another in the universe. So I won't be going game by game by game, but instead retelling the events in the order of when they occurred in the timeline. Don't worry, I'll let you know when I'm shifting from the perspective of one game to another, and there won't be any spoilers for Darksiders 3, but by the end of this video, you'll be fully prepared for the story of the third game. In the beginning, there were two kingdoms. The first, heaven, is the realm of angels. The second kingdom, hell, is the realm of demons, ruled by the Dark Prince Lucifer, Lord of all demonkind. Having been locked in eternal conflict since the dawn of time, the forces of heaven and hell wage an endless war against one another, battling for the control of all creation. The immense power of these kingdoms is only eclipsed and checked by the Charred Council and its enforcers. Older than even the kingdoms themselves, the Charred Council stands at the pivot point of all creation, an entity bound to maintain balance in the belief that any celestial power unopposed is a threat to the very fabric of existence. As decreed by ancient laws, the Charred Council acts as mediators, with both heaven and hell eventually coming to honor its laws, for none were beyond the swift and terrible justice of the Four Horsemen. The Horsemen of the Apocalypse are ancient beings of a virtually extinct race called Nephilim, engineered from a union of angels and demons by the demoness Lilith. The Nephilim were beings of immense power and ability, but unlike angels or demonkind, they had no realm of their own. So, as their numbers grew, the first of their kind, Absalom, led his race on a brutal crusade, destroying hundreds of realms in their quest to claim one for the Nephilim. But Four Horsemen had grown weary of this bloodshed, and coming to understand the threat to balance it created, had rejected the wrathful crusade and come to bargain with the council. And so a deal was struck. The four would act as regulators of the ancient laws upheld by the council and maintain order. To that end, they were granted unimaginable power and ability, making them far more formidable than even the Nephilim. Forever forsaking their past lives, they took on new identities as the Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Their first task was to destroy their race, the price of their bargain, and their redemption. Towards the end of the Nephilim's bloody conquest, the third kingdom, that of man, emerged from the ever-churning chaos of the universe. They were given the realm of Eden as their home, but Absalom rejected this, believing the Nephilim were more deserving and sought out to conquer it. Knowing of this plot, the Charred Council sent the Four Horsemen to join the forces of heaven, defending Eden. The ensuing battle brought the end of the Nephilim as the Four Horsemen slaughtered their kin. The souls of the Nephilim were captured and an amulet death wore around his neck, preserving the essence of their beings. At the end of the battle, after Death faced and defeated Absalom in combat, the Elder Nephilim was suddenly swallowed up by what appeared to be a blackened pool of his own blood. With Eden in ruins, the Council bestowed Earth as the new home of man. To prevent this new kingdom from being consumed by the eternal war of light and dark, predictably enough, both kingdoms were already trying to exert their influence over man at this point. To prevent this, the Charred Council forced a truce between heaven and hell, binding this pact with 7 seals that, once broken, would bring about the end of war. When the 3 kingdoms were ready and equal in power, the 7 seals would be broken, and the apocalypse, the final battle over creation, would begin. But this never came to pass. The apocalypse began prematurely. The treaties made to protect humanity until maturity were broken, far before they could match the power of either kingdom. When End War began, war found himself crash-landed in one of humanity's cities, witness to a war already waging between the armies of heaven and hell, slaying one another in the streets. After fighting his way deeper into the city, destroying soldiers of either force that dared stand in his way, war saw Abaddon, the leader of the Hell Guard, an elite force specializing in demon killing. Upon calling out to him and demanding the whereabouts of his brethren, Abaddon expressed shock by war's presence, exclaiming the 7th seal was not broken. In his distraction, the Archangel fell at the hands of the demon commander Straga as he emerged from the ground.
The 7th seal was not broken!
Abaddon! What in heaven's name have you done?
I answer the call.
Soon after, as War himself fought Straga and was winning, War's powers were suddenly and mysteriously drained. In his weakened state, Straga crushed him easily. Upon dying, War was sent to the Charred Council. Furious, the Charred Council held War responsible for the premature End War, the ultimate destruction of Earth, and assisting the armies of hell in claiming victory. The Horseman was sentenced to death, and his soul imprisoned in the abyss for 100 years.
The seals of the apocalypse have been broken.
The Council informed Fury, Death, and Strife of War's fate, and while Death embarked on a quest without the consent of the governed, the Charred Council charges Fury with the task of destroying the 7 deadly sins ravaging Earth, each transforming the land they occupy to match their own hellish forms. Less ambivalent than Death and more duty-bound than War, and a bit of a sadist to boot, Fury is quite different from her brothers. Her confidence in the Charred Council's authority seems absolute. She outright refuses the possibility of being a pawn in their grand machinations and scorns the wisdom of others on the subject. She even seems inclined to believe the Council's judgment of War. Additionally, she seems eager to demonstrate her skills in combat and to put her blade whip and powers over magic to use.
The 7 deadly sins roam the earth free of our prison. It is a matter that requires delicate attention. Fury. Your quest for the 7 deadly begins immediately.
Your day of reckoning is at hand, Sloth. You will be judged in combat like all the others.
Despite Fury's obvious devotion to executing the will of the Council, they bind a Watcher to Fury nevertheless. The purpose of this Watcher being as a guide in Fury's tasks and to ensure her loyalty. Fury seems to have a dim view on humanity, voicing on occasion that she sees them to be tragically overrated. Neither does she seem terribly bothered by the destruction wrought by the premature apocalypse. In contrast, her brothers War and Death possessed some amount of respect for humanity's potential and importance to the balance, a view the Council seems to agree with. Which is to say that although Fury believes in the Council and their wisdoms, she may not see eye to eye in all matters, with her devotion being more of the duty-bound sort, stemming from a desire for the Horsemen to be seen as efficient regulators. The Lord of Hollows is one of the beings she meets along her journey. He possesses a low view of the Charred Council.
The impetuous creature awakens. deluded pawn of the Charred Council.
And voices that she might be a pawn caught up in their lies, something she immediately dismisses. He has the power to circumvent the Well of Souls. If angels or demons weary of the endless war come to him, he can make them hollow, forever releasing them of the eternal cycle of reincarnation the Well of Souls submits them to. Likewise, he is also suspicious of the Council's view on balance. Nevertheless, he does aid Fury in her quest by bestowing upon her the power of Fire Hollow, and advises she hunt down a demon who endangers the very stability of Earth. I'm really curious as to who this demon lord turns out to be, but that's just about all we know as to the plot of Darksiders 3. But we do know that Darksiders 3 takes place parallel to the events of the first two games. Speaking of which, Darksiders 2 takes place during the 100-year period in which War was imprisoned in the Abyss for inciting the apocalypse prematurely. The Council informed Death and the other two horsemen of War's fate, news that Death refused to believe. After all, War was seen as the most honorable of the Four Horsemen, and so Death set out to save the younger horsemen by journeying to the Well of Souls, which is said to have power over life and death. After facing many trials, Death finally arrived at the Well of Souls, where he found Absalom, who was thoroughly corrupted. Once again, Death fought the first Nephilim, and likewise, the first Nephilim was once again defeated. A long and arduous journey behind him, and having reached the well, the horseman was presented with a choice: to resurrect the Nephilim with his amulet filled with their souls, or humanity, knowing that choosing one race would forever damn the other. Death chose to redeem his brother through resurrecting the kingdom of man, sacrificing himself and the Nephilim in the process. Meanwhile, back to the events of Darksiders 1, it was around this time that War had awoken and struck a bargain to be sent back to Earth to attempt to find and punish those that instigated the apocalypse. Upon his return to Earth, War discovered humanity was utterly annihilated by the forces of Hell, and within 100 years was extinct. The billions of corpses creating deserts with their ashes. In his quest for retribution, War discovered the Archangel Abaddon was the cause for the premature apocalypse. Seeking to lure the champions of Hell and sever their leadership, Abaddon sought to destroy all but one of the seals, thereby preventing the Horsemen's involvement and winning the war in one fell swoop while pinning the blame of breaking the seals on the demons. None of this worked, however, as while he was distracted with the appearance of a horseman, the very thing he was trying to prevent, he was killed by Straga, a champion and general of Hell. In death, Abaddon found himself in a dark void, where a voice called out to him. Revealing herself to be partially responsible for the failings of Abaddon's plan and the unexpectedly harsh resistance by the demons on Earth, Lilith then presented him with a choice: to serve in heaven or rule in hell. Abaddon's plan, which involved him breaking the treaties made with the Charred Council, having failed absolutely, decided he would rule in hell and was reborn as the Destroyer. It was in this form that he tapped into the power within the Well of Souls, took control of Hell's forces on Earth, exterminated the rest of humanity, in addition to most of the Hellguard forces, and selected 5 creatures of great power to act as his chosen. Samael, a demon once powerful enough to rival that of Lucifer himself, defied the Destroyer's rulings and was stripped of the bulk of his powers, which were then divvied up between the Destroyer's chosen, which subsequently War killed on his path of vengeance that led him to which was formerly known as Abaddon. Upon facing him in battle, the Destroyer offered up War the same question that was asked of him, which War promptly rejected with a great one-liner.
I choose what once a coward did not.
Having been slain, the 7th seal fell from Abaddon's hand and shortly thereafter was shattered.
Hell god, bitch! What did you do?
Death was revived and 3 comets plummeted to Earth, heralding the arrival of the other 3 horsemen. And that is all you need to know about the universe and lore of Darksiders. That's a recap of the entire events leading up to Darksiders 3 and just after Darksiders 3. I'm going to be releasing another in-depth video about Darksiders 3's gameplay and how it's evolved from the first 2. So stay tuned for that, but thank you very much for joining me in this journey through the history of Darksiders. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, I'll see you next time.